Hey everyone, Reed here, Big Strong Book, here today to actually do a video game review for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Yes, at long last, I finally got through Tears of the Kingdom, and boy oh boy, I've got a lot of thoughts to discuss. I think I mentioned way back when in my review of Majora's Mask, as that was the third Zelda game that I played straight through, and then Tears of the Kingdom, of course, being my fourth. In the Majora's Mask review, I mentioned that way back, kind of late last year, I began playing Tears of the Kingdom fresh off of Breath of the Wild, Ocarina of Time, and I was disappointed at first. I was disappointed with Tears of the Kingdom because I felt playing it right after Breath of the Wild, I think is a mistake because it is, at least on the surface, very similar. Similar in terms of how the progression in the game works with, getting hearts and stamina. It's the shrine system. You have the physics-based tools at your disposal. They're all, of course, different in Tears of the Kingdom, but it's that kind of environmental manipulation. It's still very much so the same thing. The dungeons are very samey to Breath of the Wild as well, and I was disappointed at first because I was like, man, this is just it's like Breath of the Wild again. And so I knew that the best way to approach Tears of the Kingdom would be to have some time pass before I reapproached it. And so after I finished Majora's Mask, I was kind of craving open world Zelda again. And so I jumped back into where I left off at Tears of the Kingdom, which was the point where I had left off previously was after Link makes his way to the surface proper, just outside of Lookout Landing. So right kind of after the starting island area. So I resumed from there and just went off to the races. So I just finished the story of the game. I believe I've put around 70 hours into the game. So nothing, not 100% by any stretch of the imagination, nowhere close to that. But did a lot in almost 70 hours within the game. I feel like I barely scratched the surface in terms of, shrines, light roots, Korok seeds, upgrading the battery capacity, all of those things. Very much so surface level, just story, some in-depth stuff and armor upgrades and things like that. But I will say, kind of before we get into the meat and potatoes of this, Tears of the Kingdom, if I had to rank the 4 Zelda games I've played thus far, this is what the order would be. 4, and with the caveat that all 4 of these are great games. 4 would be Breath of the Wild. 3 would be Majora's Mask. 2, Tears of the Kingdom. And then 1, Ocarina of Time. Tears of the Kingdom, for me, especially in comparison to Breath of the Wild, which that is a comparison that you cannot run away from. As it is a sequel, it's the same world, and there are so many similarities. The comparison is unavoidable. It improves upon Breath of the Wild, I think, in almost every single possible way, but except one major one, which we'll get into here in a little bit. It is that similarity or failure to improve that, had it been improved and improved in a significant way, this I think would even outpace Ocarina of Time for me. And I know that that's like sacrilegious to say, but I think it would. Tears of the Kingdom, the abilities, the environmental manipulation, Ascend, Recall, Fuse, and Ultra Hand, all 4 of those are just phenomenal. The possibilities with those, the construct possibilities, the things you can make, and then the inclusion of the Zonite devices, I absolutely loved. Granted, I am not a creative person when it comes to thinking tremendously outside of the box in terms of what you can build. I've seen a lot of hilarious videos on YouTube of people building like hydraulic presses that they just drive around to try to kill enemies. These insane devices that I would never have personally thought of because I don't put my time and energy into, in that aspect of the sandbox and think about, all these crazy things I can build. I'm more just kind of a scrappy, okay, I want to get from here to here. I probably need a rocket. I probably need this, that, and the other. And then you're able to do it. And I love, again, that's where this game has one of its highest praises from me, is that ability to do whatever the hell you want, or close to whatever you want with the physics, manipulation, mechanics, abilities that you're given. Ultra Hand is great. I think the one that honestly I used the least, but that I could have still benefited from, because I never thought to use it that much, was Recall. There are a couple times in a few of the dungeons where you have to utilize it, and so I did it there. But it honestly, it wasn't something that was always top of mind for me. Obviously, Ultra Hand you use all the time. I started to get more accustomed to relying on Ascend, especially when you're in a cave and you're right beneath a shrine, but you're figuring out, how the hell do I get up there? Oh yeah, that's right, I have Ascend. Sometimes I would forget about Ascend, forget that that's a very useful thing to have. And then Fuse was something that I didn't use much until late game. I think when I was like, oh my gosh, I have all of the random crap that you pick up through defeating enemies and all of that. These things that have really, really, really powerful fuse capabilities that I just didn't use, because most of the weapons that you get in this game are like rusty broadswords and night claymore swords and all of these like that on their own are very crappy, but you fuse them to rubies, you fuse them to scales from the dragons that you encounter, things like that, and then they become these insanely powerful weapons and more durable. And same with fuse. I mean, fuse with arrows I used all the time just because the game primes you to do that. Gone are the days of just getting all of these types of arrows. Instead, you have to use the components of the environment to then fuse to an arrow to create a bomb, to create fire arrows, ice arrows, lightning arrows, kind of the chuku, or whatever it's called, the chuku jelly, the yellow, the white, the blue, all of those various things, which I love. That makes the game a lot simpler, to where you can just fuse and then just quickly cycle through horizontal just scale until you find exactly what you want. And then of course what I would do is, you'd be holding down ZR, and then you're scrolling to find an item to fuse, and then you accidentally click like the wrong thing, like a bright bloom seed, when you don't need it, and then you'll shoot it and nothing will happen, and you're like, shit, I meant to get to the bomb flower, not the bright bloom seed, but you get the idea. But I love that is so much fun. Then with exploration and stuff, I mean, I think I prioritized exploration very early on in this game, especially in terms of getting to the towers. I felt that the towers overall were far easier than they were in Breath of the Wild. I don't even think in my entire playthrough, my 50-hour or whatever playthrough of Breath of the Wild, that I even got all the towers. But I for sure prioritized it this time, just because I could not stand having a map with things missing. I wanted to see where everything was, or get an idea for where things might be. The discovery of caves, the cave system was a cool thing too. But then I think in terms of other exploration stuff, obviously you have to talk about things like the depths within the game. And the depths was something that I did not access until probably midway through the game. I know a lot of people happen upon the depths with one of the Hyrule chasms kind of by Lookout Landing, which is where the game wants you to go to explore it. That was my first exposure to the depths, but it wasn't until I got the quest from Robbie or whoever it was at Lookout Landing, but then I pushed it off. I'm like, okay, cool, I've heard of the depths. I've heard that there's cool things down there, but I pushed that off for a while until I think I had found two of the sages and or defeated, got through two of the temples before I then went back and went into it. And of course, by then I knew this, and it was a good internet find. I didn't intend to, but the fact that, of course, all the light roots in the depths correspond to a shrine on the surface. They're directly below a shrine, so you can just find where a light root is, go up to the surface map, drop a pin, and you know the exact location of a shrine. And so if it's not obvious on the surface, you know that there's a cave or something nearby where that shrine is. So that was fun, and that helped me, I think, just kind of quickly find a lot of shrines and dedicate some time. I did not spend a very long time in the depths. I admit I did not. I think I maybe unlocked 20 light roots. I did not prioritize my time in the depths. I don't necessarily have anything negative to say about the depths. I didn't feel like spending a lot of time down there. I don't think you really have to spend a ton of time in the depths to get a lot out of the game. It's cool that it's there. I love the overworld, surface, underworld aspect. You get the Sky Islands, and the Sky Islands can be pretty fun at times. They have enough. They don't have an insane amount that would really make this into something tremendously terrific and special, I think, but that's just my opinion. When it came to other things in the game too, I think by the time I finished the game, I had maybe 17 hearts. Of course, I'd done the whole story, so I'd, gotten all the sages. I'd had 2 full wheels of stamina. I think, again, about 52, I had completed, 52 shrines. I had unlocked at least another 30 to 40 more as fast travel points. I had fully intended to go back and try to get as many shrines done as I possibly could, but I happened to finish the game just because I thought I might as well go to the end and see if I can beat Ganon, and sure enough, I was able to within a few tries. I'll get into some story spoilers here, so you've been warned. Unfortunately, before I think I had even started this game, I got it spoiled that Link finds the Master Sword in a dragon. I didn't know any other context behind that. I just know that you eventually would get the Master Sword from a dragon. I did not know that that dragon was going to be Zelda. However, I started to put the pieces together because I knew that, like, minor spoiler. I think just knowing it's a dragon is a minor spoiler. It's not a major spoiler. But then in one of the memories, when Zelda is talking to Minoru, and Minoru mentions that you can swallow your stone and then you become an immortal dragon, and I was like, oh, okay, so this is probably where and that actually made me even more invested, because I'm like, wow, that's a really cool twist, a really cool direction for the story to go that I would not have really anticipated otherwise. So I was very pleasantly surprised by that. And when it came to Breath of the Wild, I did not do the memories. I did not do the memory quests, or I didn't do all of them, certainly. But of course, I made a point. I think the memories work in a way because the story, having that build up to when Zelda transforms into that dragon, is a terrific build-up where you're slowly just garnering pieces of the puzzle along the way as you're finding all of these geoglyphs. And then at long last, you build up to where you see her and you see the Master Sword, and you know what you have to do. You know that you have to get onto that dragon and pull that sword out. And that was just, it was such a lovely build-up in the story, like a long, slow burn build-up all the way until you get to that point, and I loved that. So this story is perhaps, I would argue it is perhaps the most emotionally affecting story of the series. And yes, I know that that might piss a lot of people off who love, 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 love Majora's Mask or Ocarina of Time. And that's not a dog on any of those. I think just because of when you sit back and it was the scope of what Zelda's sacrifice means for this story and how it propels everything forward and how it is such a cool, no pun intended, link to the past, of what that means and how Zelda takes herself essentially back to the future by becoming an immortal dragon, and you're not knowing as to whether or not. I mean, I kind of figure that eventually you would get Zelda proper back, but Zelda makes that sacrifice knowing that she will lose herself entirely. There's no guarantee of success. There's just a hope that Link will be able to kind of put the pieces together and find her and find the Master Sword. Zelda just does it all in hoping that it will work and not a guarantee that it will. And I loved that. I loved that emotional kind of crux in the story. I loved how this story ties to the past in the way that you have the imprisoning war. You get a lot of hints at it. And then Raru's kind of final act of devotion to seal away, to sacrifice himself and seal away Ganon. And I loved that of how of Raru telling Ganon, he's like, I don't have to worry. He's like, this will not work. It will work for now, but it won't work. But we know it will, because someday there will be a swordsman named Link in the future, who will stop you. And then that helps to tie into kind of what at the beginning when you and Zelda are exploring, or Link and Zelda are exploring beneath Hyrule Castle before they happen upon the kind of stilled in time corpse of the Demon King, and then of course you lose Zelda and lose your hearts and all of that at the beginning. So it ties in very nicely to that. I loved the story. It worked so well for me. It really kept things going at a great pace. I loved a lot of the kind of regional stories as well, even though they got repetitive at times, especially when it came to the post-temple credit scene or post-temple cut scenes that were essentially the same. They didn't impart any new information about the imprisoning war. It was just, they said the same thing, like Raru and the Six Sages, they just came together and were able to kind of put a temporary stop to Ganondorf and all of that. And I would say of the sages where it was like, okay, it's an interesting story, is that of Minoru, somebody who failed and whose spirit is now attached to this construct. I loved the idea of the construct factory. And I mean, even though it's, it's its own little basic, it's kind of like, okay, go here, you'll find this piece, you'll find this piece, you'll find this piece. But reconstructing Minoru, it was a very, very cool thing that I did not expect. And that was very exciting to discover. But yeah, a lot of this game, it just had it had a great propulsive momentum that kept the game moving forward. It always kept me invested in that regard. And I'll get into, I think, some of the negatives that I have of this game, and one of which is something that I really hope, and I know I'm not alone, and I don't know if it's a majority opinion held by the Zelda fan base. I don't know. I know it is a very loud opinion, and I'm totally within this camp, but that I just hope that the Zelda franchise can get back to intricate, in-depth, complex dungeons, where the linearity within the dungeons has meaning, where the design is so cool, it's so unique, where every dungeon is different, where you find items that then you have to use within that. I mean, you have the sage abilities in this game, which you need to get through the temples, but the temples are just they're all the same. It's just all, okay, we have to find a way to turn all of these hoses on, or to open up all of these holes, or get all these rotors moving. It's all the same thing, and the dungeons have no mystery. They tell you where everything is. I did not like that at all. Even though the complex, intricate Zelda dungeons of olden times, even though those can be frustrating because of how dense and elusive they are rich. And you feel like you've accomplished something when you're able to kind of find your way to a room that you had no idea was there, or you see where you know where you have to go, but you don't know how to get to that point. That was something that was sorely lacking from this game. If the dungeons had the depth of even the Majora's Mask dungeons, or certainly the Ocarina of Time, if they just had a few, and the few had that depth, I mean, I honestly think for the team developing Tears of the Kingdom, there was no excuse. There was no excuse for them in terms of the amount of stuff they're able to do and the amount of freedom that they give the player, and all of the like ways they're able to manipulate the environment to then have dungeons that are so samey and that are so incredibly lacking. It is something that I found so frustrating. I would say the coolest of the 5 dungeons, I mean, I guess there are 6 if you include Hyrule Castle. But of the dungeons, I would say the best was, or the coolest design, or the most fun, was the Fire Temple. That was cool. It was like, okay, we're going into Death Mountain, and then we've got this little like abandoned mine shaft, mine cart, and you've got to kind of like use the cart. Like that was a lot of fun. I had fun doing that. The worst, far and away for me, was technically the Spirit Temple, although I would count the Construct Factory as part of the Spirit Temple, and that the concept of that and what you're trying to do in terms of being able to construct Minoru, that was cool. That alone gives it points above the Water Temple, which I just found to be absolutely atrocious. It was so stupidly simple. A 1-year-old could do it. The only complexity with that was the boss fight was it had a little bit of a learning curve, but the temple itself was so boring. It was so simple, so bland. There was no character, there was no identity to it whatsoever. At the very least, the Wind Temple, even though that was kind of blah, and the boss fight in particular was the easiest thing. It was like eating a ham and cheese sandwich. It's the easiest thing on earth. That dungeon design had a little bit of character with the ship. The Lightning Temple, it had identity, it had character, it had a cool trying to utilize the mirrors on all the levels, but still very simple at the end of the day. Hyrule Castle was cool, but it just had a lot of repetition, especially when it was so obvious that Zelda was just this just a trick. It was a fake Zelda. That was so obvious. So fighting through the various waves of enemies as you make your way around Hyrule Castle, it was very But again, the only dungeon that I think had true character was the Fire Temple. Spirit Temple. Spirit Temple is just a boss fight when it comes down to it. But at the very least, you have the Construct Factory before it, which is it's a little cool. It's more of the same in terms of you've got 4 different areas and you have to go to each of the areas and you know exactly where they are. Blah blah blah. I think I don't know, especially with the criticism that Breath of the Wild had, but at least the Divine Beasts had identity and they were individual and they were kind of cool. Here the dungeons were just blah. It's like it was an afterthought for them. One of the most a dungeon, right, in the Zelda game, one of the most defining characteristics of the gameplay and the gameplay loops is the dungeon, and you put the least amount of effort into it. It's just so blah. It's so boring in comparison to the rest of the game, and had they put a lot of effort into those dungeons, even if you only had the handful of dungeons, but even if just 3 of them, 3 of the 5 or 6, if they were on a level of depth that we have come to expect with the Zelda games, this game would rival Ocarina of Time in my eyes for the #1 spot. It just doesn't. And I hope that Zelda. I love the open world. I love an open world game, and I love the Zelda's franchise's take on the open world. It's great. It's a game changer, obviously. But we need to return to linear dungeons, and linear and complex dungeons with coolness, with identity, and with great boss fights too. We need that. We need to return to that. There's got to be a way to marry the two together, to marry the non-linearity and open world with complex linear dungeons. I think there is room for those two things to coexist. Now, I have heard that Echoes of Wisdom, which I have, but I have not played yet. I will probably play soon. I have heard that that game answers a little bit of that. It is still able to be non-linear, open world. You're able to do the dungeons non-linearly, but the dungeons are great and complex. I've heard that it seems, I don't know if that's like an overwhelming majority of opinions on it, but that's at least a take. And so that makes me a little excited to get to Echoes of Wisdom, and it makes me excited like, okay, I mean, they can't be deaf to the criticism. Even though Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, head and shoulders the best-selling titles in the series. They've sold dozens of millions of copies. So money talks, and they might just keep on with this formula. I think whatever the next mainline 3D Zelda game, whenever we get that, probably in, 5 years or something, 2029, 2030 is probably when it'll come out, that whenever we get the Switch 2 Zelda, that is what I want. I also want a story. Even though I think the memories worked really well in Tears of the Kingdom, I want a more invested story that's not just told in flashback. That would be nice. So, a more involved story, perhaps a different way, getting away from the shrine system too. The shrine system is fine. It's unique, but it's just try something new. And that's why I think like Tears of the Kingdom, even though I think in almost every single way, it is an improvement over Breath of the Wild. It actually makes Breath of the Wild, I think, look worse in retrospect, because I'm like, why would I ever want to play Breath of the Wild again? Honestly, because this game has everything that I wanted from a Breath of the Wild, almost everything minus the dungeons. So I'll just replay this, but then I'm like, I feel less motivated to play Breath of the Wild. But then on the flip side, does Tears of the Kingdom do enough to justify its own existence? Does it get out of the long shadow that Breath of the Wild cast? By doing its own thing, by being a radically different sequel, kind of a Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time. And it does not. I don't know if it needed to. I think that Tears of the Kingdom can be judged on its merits and what it is versus what it is not. But there is that to consider. So Tears of the Kingdom, like, it's a phenomenal, remarkable game that I think is better than Breath of the Wild, but there are those fundamental flaws with it, and it remains to be seen as to whether or not those flaws are now just mainstays within the franchise or whether they will be improved upon a future game. I really hope they are, and I hope the team that is making the Zelda games at Nintendo, I hope that they are receptive to that. One can only hope, right? But yeah, Tears of the Kingdom, it's phenomenal game. Improves over Breath of the Wild in every way. Has a wonderful, emotional, impacting story. It's just, there's that little something that's leaving you wanting a little more. If it had that more, this would be the best game in the franchise, at least of the ones that I have played. But it doesn't have that yet. So, Tears of the Kingdom, let me know what you think. I think for me, in terms of what will be the next Zelda game I play, might be Echoes of Wisdom. I might switch towards a 2D game. I've also got a hankering to play Twilight Princess, so I might play that next. I have access to it on a Wii, so I might play that. Maybe Skyward Sword, who knows? I might try to get away from open world stuff and do a more linear Zelda for a change, so I might try that. So, let me know what you think of Tears of the Kingdom and Zelda in general, and as always, I will see you guys next time.